You were at a dinner last Saturday. The table was full. Someone was laughing about something that happened at work. Someone else poured you a glass of wine without asking, which means they noticed you, which means they care. And somewhere between the salad and the second glass, you felt it anyway. Here's what is strange about it. If you were actually alone in your apartment on a Tuesday night, you might not feel this at all. The loneliness only arrives when the room is full. And that contradiction is exactly what we need to talk about. That specific quiet. The one that only shows up when everyone else seems to be somewhere you are not. Not physically. Physically, you are right there. But something behind your ribs, some internal weather, was not at the table at all. Before we go any further, I need to say this first, because nobody says it early enough, and they should. If you feel alone in a room full of people who love you, there is nothing wrong with you. You're not ungrateful. You are not difficult. You're not asking for too much. What you are feeling has a name, a mechanism, and a long history in psychological research. And when you understand what is actually happening, not the story you tell yourself about it, but the real thing underneath, something loosens. Not because it goes away, but because you stop blaming yourself for it. So let us turn the light on, gently. Here is the first thing worth understanding. Loneliness is not the absence of people. Loneliness is the gap between the connection you have and the connection your nervous system actually needs. And those are two very different measurements. Think of it this way. You can eat a meal and still be hungry. Not because there was no food, but because what you ate did not have what your body needed. Connection works the same way. You can be in a room full of warmth and conversation and still feel a kind of emotional hunger, because the specific nutrient your mind is reaching for is not on the table. That nutrient has a name. Psychologists call it felt belonging. Not being around people, not being included, not even being loved, but feeling in the nervous system, in the body, that you are seen, specifically accurately, in the version of yourself that you are right now. Not the version you perform, not the version they remember, the one sitting here tonight. When that feeling is present, you can be alone and feel completely whole. When it is absent, you can be surrounded and feel completely hollow. The room does not decide. The gap does. There is a second layer here, and it is the one most people miss. We live in a time where proximity has been confused with connection. You sit next to someone at work for 8 hours. You live with a partner you see every morning. You attend a family dinner every Sunday. And something in the cultural script tells you that should be enough. You are not alone. Look at all these people. But proximity is geography. Connection is recognition. You can be geographically surrounded and emotionally invisible. You can share a bed with someone and still carry a loneliness that lives in the 2 inches between your shoulder and theirs. Not because they do not love you, but because love and being seen are not always the same thing. The American Psychological Association's most recent data tells us that more than half of American adults feel isolated, feel left out, or feel they lack companionship. More than half. This is not a personality flaw. This is a structural condition of modern life. You are not lonely because you are broken. You are lonely because the architecture of the world has prioritized proximity over depth. And your nervous system knows the difference even when your calendar does not. There's a third thing happening, and it is quieter than the others. but it might be the most important. When you feel alone in a group, part of what is happening is that you are performing a version of yourself that is close enough to pass, but not close enough to satisfy. Psychologists call this self-monitoring, the real-time editing of your tone, your opinions, your emotional temperature to match the room. Everyone does this to some degree. It is social intelligence, and it is not a flaw. But for some people, the ones who feel things more deeply, the ones who grew up reading rooms for safety, the ones who learned early that the full version of themselves was too much for the room, the editing becomes so constant that it stops feeling like editing and starts feeling like exile. You are in the room, but the you that is in the room is a curated you. And the real you, the one who is tired or sad or quietly on fire with something you cannot name, that version is watching from behind the performance, and that version is alone. That is the loneliness that arrives in a crowd. It is not the absence of people. It is the absence of yourself among them. But here is the part nobody tells you. The loneliness you feel in a crowd is not a failure of connection. It is evidence of how specific your need for connection actually is. Your nervous system is not asking for more people. It is asking for the right moment with the right person. The kind of moment where you do not have to translate yourself before you speak. And if that sounds like a high standard, it is. But it is not a flaw. It is a frequency. And the fact that you have not found it in every room you have entered does not mean it does not exist. It means you have been listening more carefully than the room deserved. Someone has probably told you the fix. Just call someone. Just text a friend. Just put yourself out there. And I want to be honest about why that advice, which is not wrong exactly, still misses the thing. When you are in this particular kind of loneliness, the in a crowd kind, reaching out often feels harder, not easier, because the issue is not access to people. The issue is that contact without depth makes the feeling worse, not better. You call someone and you talk for 20 minutes and you hang up, and the quiet is louder than before, because the conversation confirmed what you already feared, that even when someone is right there, the gap persists. This is not a failure of effort. This is the nervous system's honest feedback. It is telling you, I do not need more interaction. I need a different kind of interaction, the kind where I do not have to arrive pre-assembled, the kind where the silence between sentences is comfortable, not something to fill. That kind of connection is not available on demand. And acknowledging that is not pessimism. It is precision. Something else shifts as you get older with this feeling. In your 20s, the loneliness in a crowd tends to feel like confusion. You think, everyone else seems to know how to do this. Everyone else seems to belong here. What am I missing? And you try harder. You go to more things. You stay later. You say yes when your body is screaming to go home. In your 30s, the confusion often becomes something quieter, a kind of resignation. You stop trying to fix it. You accept that some rooms will never feel like yours. And there is a grief in that acceptance, because you are letting go of the hope that you are just one party, one friend group, one invitation away from feeling like you belonged. And then somewhere in the decade after, for many people, not all, but many, something unexpected happens. The need to belong everywhere quiets down, and a different, more selective belonging takes its place. You stop trying to feel at home in every room. You start noticing which rooms you actually feel at home in. And they are usually smaller and quieter and less impressive than the ones you used to force yourself into. That is not giving up. That is the nervous system finally being honest about what it needs. And what it needs, it turns out, was never a bigger table. It was a smaller one, with the right person sitting across from it. Here's what I think is the most important thing to understand about this kind of loneliness, and it is the thing that almost nobody says. The aloneness you feel in a crowd is not just pain, it is also a signal, and the signal is doing something useful. When your nervous system registers that the room does not meet your need for real connection, it pulls you inward, not to punish you, to protect you. It is conserving your emotional energy for the moments that actually matter. It is saying, do not spend yourself here. This is not the room. Save your openness for the room that earns it. That withdrawal you feel at the dinner table, the slight pulling back, the quieting, the sense that a part of you has gone somewhere the rest of you cannot follow, that is not dysfunction. That is your mind doing what a thermostat does in a house. It is reading the emotional temperature and adjusting you downward to keep you from spending heat on a cold room. The loneliness is not the problem. The loneliness is the compass. It is pointing you toward the kind of connection that will actually warm you, and away from the kind that only looks warm from the outside. Feeling alone in a full room is like standing in a house with every light on, and knowing that the one room you actually live in is dark. The kitchen is bright. The hallway is bright. The living room is warm and loud and full of people who mean well. But the room where you keep the real things, the room where your actual thoughts live, where the version of you that does not perform sits quietly with its shoes off, that room has no light in it tonight. And nobody at the party knows that room exists, not because they do not care, but because you have never shown it to anyone. Because the last time you tried, the person you showed it to looked around and said, "Why is it so quiet in here?" So you close the door, and you have been hosting from the hallway ever since. So if tonight you are sitting somewhere with that familiar quiet, the one that settles in when the room is full and your chest is not, I am not going to tell you what to do about it. I am not going to tell you to call someone, or join something, or practice vulnerability, or try harder to connect. The world has given you enough instructions. You do not need another one from me. I'm just going to say this. The fact that you feel alone in a crowd is not evidence that you are too much, or too little, or too broken for connection. It is evidence that your definition of connection is more specific than what most rooms are offering. And that is not a flaw in you. That is a standard. A quiet, private, non-negotiable standard that you have been carrying your whole life. One that says, I would rather feel alone honestly than feel accompanied by something that is not real. And that standard, the one you thought was making you lonely, is actually the same thing that will eventually lead you to the kind of connection that does not require you to leave yourself at the door. You were never the problem in the room.